Quiet no more. Bullies forced his head in a toilet. Now they'll regret ever touching him. Marcus Finley didn't want any trouble. At 15, he was the newest sophomore at Westlake High, a sprawling brick institution on the outskirts of town that had seen better days. Its hallways were lined with dented lockers. The fluorescent lights buzzed incessantly, and the air always smelled faintly of floor cleaner and teenage desperation. Marcus had been there for exactly 3 weeks, and each day had been worse than the last. He was painfully aware of how he appeared to others. At 5'6", and slightly overweight, with thick glasses that were always sliding down his nose, and clothes that never quite fit right, he knew he looked like the perfect target, his father's. Military career had moved them 8 times in 15 years, and each new school followed the same pattern. A period of blessed invisibility followed by inevitable discovery by the local predators. What no one at Westlake knew, what no one at any of his schools had ever known, was that Marcus had been training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu since he was 7 years old. His father, a former Special Forces operative, had insisted on it. "The old world is full of wolves, son," he'd say during their weekend training sessions in the garage. "You don't need to go looking for fights, but you damn well better know how to end one." Marcus had earned his purple belt last year, but his father had been clear. Martial arts were for defense, not for showing off, and certainly not for intimidation. True strength, his father would remind him, is knowing when not to use it. So Marcus kept his head down at Westlake, even as he became the favorite target of Damon Wells and his 2 sidekicks, Tyler Reese and Jackson Moore. Damon was everything. Marcus wasn't. Tall, muscular, with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been the new kid. He was a junior, the star receiver on the football team, and seemed to take personal offense at Marcus's very existence. It started small, as it always did. Shoulder checks in the hallway, snickers when he spoke up in class, his backpack mysteriously emptying itself onto the cafeteria floor. "Watch where you're going, Fat Finley," Damon had sneered the first time, loud enough for everyone to hear. The nickname stuck instantly. The teachers saw, of course. Ms. Patel, his English teacher, would frown disapprovingly but never actually intervene. Mr. Gonzalez, the gym teacher, seemed to find it amusing when Marcus was the last one picked for teams, standing awkwardly as the captains argued over who had to take him. "Just part of high school," the guidance counselor had told him when he'd tried to report it early on. "Try making some friends. Join a club." So he withdrew, kept to himself, tried to become invisible again. He ate lunch alone in the far corner of the cafeteria, buried himself in books, and counted the days until his father's next transfer would take them away from Westlake. "Just keep your head down," he told himself every morning. "Don't engage, don't give them ammunition, don't become what they are." But Damon and his friends seemed to take his passivity as an invitation. The torment escalated. They stole his gym clothes and hung them from the flagpole. They created a social media page dedicated to mocking him. They followed him home, throwing pebbles and insults from a safe distance. Through it all, Marcus maintained his control, repeated his father's mantra, "True strength is knowing when not to use it." Even as his hands itched to demonstrate exactly how quickly he could put Damon on his back, even as he plotted out in his mind the precise sequence of moves that would render Tyler helpless, he held back. Until that Tuesday in October, the day had started badly. Marcus had overslept, missed the bus, and arrived late to first period, earning a detention. At lunch, he discovered his brown bag had been emptied, his sandwich stomped into the floor beneath his usual table. In chemistry, someone, he knew, exactly who, had put blue dye in his goggles, leaving raccoon-like circles around his eyes for the rest of the day. By the time last period rolled around, Marcus was exhausted. His shoulders ached from being tensed all day, and his jaw hurt from clenching. When the final bell rang, he waited until the hallways cleared before heading to his locker. He just wanted to go home, to collapse into the safety of his room, to call his dad and maybe, finally, tell him everything. He didn't notice Damon and his friends until they surrounded him. "Fat Finley," Damon's voice echoed in the nearly empty hallway. "We missed you at lunch today." Marcus kept his eyes on his locker, methodically sorting books into his backpack. Ignore them. They'll get bored. They always get bored eventually. But they didn't get bored. Instead, Tyler slammed Marcus's locker shut, nearly catching his fingers. "Hey, we're talking to you," Jackson said, pushing Marcus's shoulder hard enough to make him stumble. Something flickered in Marcus's chest then. Not fear, which had become so familiar it was practically background noise, but anger. Pure, hot anger that made his fingertips tingle. He suppressed it. Took a breath. "I need to catch my bus." Damon laughed, a harsh sound that bounced off the metal lockers. "No, you don't. You need to pay the new kid tax. We've been letting you slide, but time's up." Marcus tried to step around them, but they blocked his path. Down the hall, he saw Ms. Patel emerge from her classroom, take in the scene, and quickly duck back inside, closing her door. No help there, he thought bitterly. No help anywhere. "I don't have any money," Marcus said, which was true. His lunch money had disappeared from his backpack the week before. "That's okay," Damon said with a grin that showed too many teeth. "We'll take payment another way." Before Marcus could react, Tyler and Jackson had seized his arms. He could have broken free. He knew exactly how to shift his weight, how to use their momentum against them. But years of restraint held him back. They dragged him into the boys' bathroom, his heels squeaking against the linoleum floor. The bathroom was deserted, the fluorescent lights casting a sickly green glow over the chipped tile walls. The smell of disinfectant couldn't quite mask the underlying odors of urine and cigarettes. "Time for your swirly, fat Finley," Damon announced, kicking open the door to the largest stall. Inside, the toilet water was an alarming blue from cleaning. Chemicals. Marcus felt a surge of panic. "Don't," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Just let me go home." "After your baptism," Damon replied, nodding to his friends. They forced Marcus to his knees in front of the toilet. He could have fought then, should have fought, but something in him still held back, still believed this was just another humiliation to endure, to get through, to survive, until his head was underwater. The shock of it, the cold, the chemicals burning his eyes and nose, the sheer violation of it, shattered something inside him. They pulled him up, gasping and sputtering, toilet water streaming from his hair down his face, soaking his shirt, and they laughed, all three of them, laughing like it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. Marcus heard their laughter as if from far away. Everything suddenly seemed very clear, very sharp. Time slowed down. Enough, he thought. The word resonated through him like a bell. Enough. When they pushed his head down again, Marcus was ready. He planted his feet, braced himself against the toilet bowl, and exploded upward with all the force his body could generate. The back of his head connected with Damon's chin with a satisfying crack. He felt rather than heard Damon's teeth clack together, heard the startled grunt of pain. The hands on his shoulders loosened momentarily, and that was all Marcus needed. He spun, water flying from his soaked hair, and faced his tormentors. Damon was staggering back, hand to his bleeding mouth. Tyler and Jackson looked shocked, frozen in place by the sudden reversal. Marcus didn't hesitate. Years of training took over, muscle memory guiding his movements. He stepped into Tyler's space and executed a perfect hip throw, using the taller boy's weight against him. Tyler went airborne for a split second before crashing to the bathroom floor with an impact that knocked the wind from his lungs. Jackson recovered enough to swing a wild punch. Marcus slipped it easily, grabbed the outstretched arm, and applied a wrist lock that dropped Jackson to his knees, howling in pain. "What the fuck?" Damon had recovered enough to sputter, blood dripping from his split lip. Marcus didn't answer. His glasses were gone, lost in the toilet or crushed underfoot, but he didn't need them now. His vision had narrowed to just these three boys who had made his life hell. Damon charged, exactly as Marcus knew he would. Bullies always doubled down when challenged. His father had taught him that. Damon was bigger, stronger, but had no technique, no discipline. Marcus sidestepped, caught Damon's arm, and used his momentum to slam him face first into the bathroom wall. The impact was loud enough to echo, leaving a small dent in the drywall and a smear of blood from Damon's already injured mouth. Tyler had staggered to his feet, wheezing, and lunged for Marcus again. This time, Marcus didn't hold back. He delivered. A sharp elbow strike to Tyler's solar plexus, followed by a sweep that sent the bigger boy crashing back to the floor. Jackson was still on his knees, cradling his wrist. "Please," he whimpered. "Stop." But something had broken loose in Marcus, some dam of rage and humiliation that had been building not just for the past 3 weeks, but for years. Every school, every bully, every time he'd walked away, every time he'd hidden his strength, it all crystallized into this moment. He grabbed Jackson by the shirt collar and dragged him to the toilet. "How does it feel?" he hissed, forcing Jackson's head toward the water. "How does it feel?" Jackson was sobbing now, genuine fear in his eyes. "I'm sorry, please, I'm sorry." A hand grabbed Marcus's shoulder. Damon, blood streaming from his nose and mouth, tried to pull Marcus away. Without even looking, Marcus drove his elbow back and up, catching Damon under the chin again. Damon's head snapped back, and he collapsed against the stall partition, sliding to the floor. "You're crazy," Tyler gasped from his position on the floor. "You're fucking crazy." Maybe he was. Marcus felt disconnected from himself, watching his body move with the precision and violence he'd always kept leashed. He released Jackson, who scrambled away, and turned to Tyler. "Get up," Marcus said, his voice eerily calm. Tyler shook his head, genuine terror in his eyes. "No way, man. We're done. We're sorry. Get up," Marcus roared, and the sound bounced off the tile walls, a primal sound of rage that startled even him. The bathroom door burst open. Mr. Gonzalez stood there, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. 3 of the school's athletes sprawled on the bathroom floor, bloody and beaten, while the new kid, the quiet one, the victim, stood over them with his fists still clenched and toilet water dripping from his hair. "What the hell is going on here?" Mr. Gonzalez demanded. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, to Marcus's surprise, it was Damon who answered, his words slurred through his swelling lip. "We started it," he mumbled. We put his head in the toilet." Mr. Gonzalez looked from Damon to Marcus, disbelief clear on his face. "You did this?" he asked Marcus. "All by yourself?" Marcus nodded slowly, the rage beginning to ebb, reality rushing back in. He suddenly felt very tired, very wet, and very, very visible. "Principal's office. All of you. Now." In the principal's office, the story came out in pieces. Damon, Tyler, and Jackson, nursing their various injuries, admitted to the systematic bullying. Other students, sensing the shift in power, came forward with their own accounts of witnessing the harassment. Principal Davis, a stern woman with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses that hung from a chain around her neck, listened to it all with an increasingly thunderous expression. "And none of you," she said, glaring at Mr. Gonzalez and Ms. Patel, who had been summoned, thought to report this behavior? Patel looked at her shoes. Mr. Gonzalez mumbled something about boys being boys and received such a withering look from Principal Davis that he physically recoiled. Marcus's father arrived, still in his military uniform. He took one look at his son, soaking wet and battered, and his face hardened into a mask that made even Damon shrink back in his seat. "Sir," Marcus began, but his father held up a hand. "I want to hear exactly what happened," he said, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of command. "Everything." So Marcus told them about the weeks of torment, about his adherence to his father's teachings, his restraint, his attempts to report the bullying, about the final indignity of the toilet, and how something in him had snapped. When he finished, his father turned to Principal Davis. "What's going to happen here?" Principal Davis sighed. "Fighting is against school policy. Normally, this would mean suspension for all parties involved." "Normally," Marcus's father repeated, his tone making it clear that this was not a normal situation. "However," Principal Davis continued, "given the circumstances and the testimony of multiple witnesses regarding the ongoing harassment, I believe different consequences are warranted." She turned to Damon, Tyler, and Jackson. You three are suspended for 2 weeks. When you return, you'll be on behavioral probation for the remainder of the year. 1 toe out of line, and you're out. Additionally, you'll be required to attend anti-bullying workshops and perform community service. Damon opened his mouth to protest, but a look from Marcus's father silenced him. As for you, Marcus, Principal Davis said, her tone softening slightly, while I understand the provocation, violence is never the answer. You'll serve detention for the rest of the week, and you'll need to speak with our school counselor about anger management. Marcus's father nodded. Fair enough. And what about the teachers who saw what was happening and did nothing? Ms. Patel flushed. Mr. Gonzalez suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. Principal Davis's lips thinned. That will be handled internally. I assure you, it will be addressed. After the meeting, Marcus and his father walked to the car in silence. It wasn't until they were both inside, doors closed against the world, that his father spoke. You should have told me. Marcus stared. Out the window. You always said true strength is knowing when not to. Use it. Yes, his father agreed, but I also taught you to stand up for yourself. There's a difference between seeking out fights and defending yourself when there's no other option. I lost control, Marcus admitted. I could have really hurt them. His father started the car. But you didn't. You stopped. That's the difference between you and them, Marcus. You know your strength and you know your limits. He put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. I'm not saying what you did was right, but I understand it. And I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest, some tension he hadn't even realized he was carrying. The next day at school was strange. Word had spread, as it always did, but the story had taken on mythic proportions. In the hallways, students who had never spoken to him before nodded in greeting. Some looked afraid, others impressed, but all of them saw him, really saw him, perhaps for the first time. In the cafeteria, a girl named Sophia, who he'd noticed before but had been too shy to approach, sat down across from him at his usual isolated table. Is this seat taken? She asked, though the entire table was empty as always. No, Marcus replied, pushing his glasses, his backup pair, up his nose. It's all yours, she smiled. I think what you did was brave, she said, standing up to them like that. Marcus poked at his lunch. I shouldn't have lost control. Maybe, Sophia agreed, but maybe they needed to see there are consequences for treating people that way. Over the next few weeks, things settled into a new normal. Damon, Tyler, and Jackson returned from their suspension subdued. They gave Marcus a wide berth in the hallways, their eyes sliding away whenever he looked in their direction. One afternoon, as Marcus was leaving school, he found Damon waiting by the front doors, alone. Marcus tensed, ready for anything, but Damon held his hands up in surrender. Can we talk? He asked. His split lip had healed, but there was a new wariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. They walked together to the edge of the school grounds, an awkward silence between them. I wanted to say I'm sorry, Damon finally said, for everything, the names, the toilet, all of it. Marcus studied him, looking for the trick, the trap. Why? Damon shrugged, genuinely uncomfortable. Because it was wrong. And because you could have really hurt us, but you didn't. He scuffed his shoe against the ground. My dad, he hits me sometimes, when he's drunk. I guess I wanted someone else to feel as powerless as I do at home. He looked up, meeting Marcus's eyes. That's not an excuse, just, I get it now, what it feels like to be afraid. Marcus didn't know what to say. He hadn't expected this, hadn't prepared for vulnerability from his tormentor. I'm sorry too, he finally offered, for losing control like that. Damon shook his head. Don't be. I had it coming. He stuck out his hand. Truce. Marcus looked at the offered hand for a long moment. Then slowly, he took it. Truce. They weren't friends after that, not exactly, but the bullying stopped completely. Not just for Marcus, but for others too. It was as if Damon, in facing his own demons, had lost the taste for creating fear in others. Marcus joined the school's martial arts club, finally letting his skills show in a controlled environment. Mr. Gonzalez, perhaps trying to make amends, asked him to help coach some of the younger students. Marcus found he had a talent for teaching, for showing others how to find strength in themselves. Miss Patel approached him after class one day with a book recommendation, a novel about a young martial artist finding his way in the world, and an apology. "I should have done more," she admitted. "I'm sorry I didn't." By the time winter break arrived, Marcus had transformed from the invisible new kid to a respected member of the school community. He had friends now, real ones who knew his strengths and his weaknesses and accepted both. Sophia had become more than a friend, their first awkward date to the movies expanding into something sweet and promising. The bullies who had tormented him were still there, but they had been diminished somehow, their power over the school broken by a boy they had underestimated. Tyler had even joined the martial arts club, sheepishly asking Marcus for pointers, which Marcus provided without resentment. On the last day before break, as Marcus cleaned out his locker, Principal Davis stopped by. "How are you settling in, Mr. Finley?" she asked. Marcus considered the question. "Good," he said finally. "Really good." She nodded, satisfied. "Your father mentioned you might be moving again at the end of the school year. Military life." "Yeah," Marcus admitted. "Probably." Well," she said, "I hope not. You've made quite an impact here. It would be a shame to lose you." As she walked away, Marcus realized she was right. He had made an impact, not through fear or intimidation, but by finally standing up, by refusing to be invisible any longer. Later that night, he broached the subject with his father. "Dad, if we get transfer orders again, could we maybe stay this time, just finish high school in one place?" His father looked up from his paperwork, surprised. "You want to stay at Westlake, even after everything?" Marcus nodded. "Especially after everything. I feel like I finally found my place there." His father studied him for a long moment, seeing the changes in his son, the straight shoulders, the direct gaze, the quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. "I'll see what I can do," he promised. "No guarantees, but I'll try." Marcus smiled, genuinely happy for the first time in longer than he could remember. He had entered Westlake as a victim, become a victor, and emerged as something else entirely. Someone who understood that true strength wasn't about domination or submission, but about standing firm in your own power while allowing others to find theirs. The bullies had put his head in a toilet, thinking they had chosen an easy target. They couldn't have been more wrong. In trying to break him, they had instead forced him to become whole, to integrate the fighter he had been trained to be with the compassionate person he wanted to become. As he lay in bed that night, Marcus thought about the boy he had been just a few months ago, afraid of his own shadow, hiding his strength. That boy was gone now, transformed by fire into someone new, someone who would never again be invisible, never again be a victim, but also, and this was the important part, never become what he had fought against. True strength, his father had taught him, is knowing when not to use it. But equally important, Marcus had learned on his own, was knowing when you must.